some of those choices. And but it will be, you have a choice. In our family, Liz isn't so good on the choices front. When we go out to dinner, there'll be a moment when we're given the menus, and that moment will last, and that moment will last, and that moment will last. And every time that the waiter or waitress comes up to us, there'll be leave me till last, leave me till last. Because Liz actually has got a fear of making the wrong choice in that moment. There might be something so wonderful on that menu that she'll miss it. And so I don't have that problem. I just make that decision. But as soon as I've chosen, I know that Liz is going to straight away choose the thing I've chosen. Because she does that, because she goes, that might be the best thing. And if I haven't chosen that, then I'll be really thinking I've missed out. And I'm thinking, if we choose something each that's slightly different, we can taste something else on the menu. That is not where my wife goes. But for me, making choices is easy. That doesn't mean that I always make the right choice. The Clash song says, should I stay or should I go? On occasions at parties, I should have gone and not stayed. There are things that we are called to do and make a choice. Each one of us have a choice to be engaged this morning or be distracted, to be present or afar, to push away from God or push into God. The thing is, the world, the flesh and the devil is so often trying to push us away. Yet, Jesus is always calling us home. But there is always a choice. I was thinking about this and thinking, what's the choice? There's been a choice on the cross when there was two prisoners. The two prisoners are standing on the cross and they have a choice. One of them chooses to speak to Jesus and ask him for help. The other one pushes away. The prodigal son, I think, Jesus didn't just turn up to the prodigal son, or the father didn't turn up to the prodigal son. There was a choice that the prodigal son, when he was at the end of himself, he made a choice to turn back towards home. So there's always a choice. And in our reading today, I joked with Pete last week, and I think he told the same joke at the 9 o'clock. We were laughing about the fact that I wasn't on roster to preach this morning. It was on St. John the Baptist and his beheading. And I was going, who's going to get that one? That's a great one. And then realised I put no one on the rota. I was like, no. So I now find myself preaching about John the Baptist. But actually, although being one of the most gruesome stories in the New Testament, alongside the Passion of Christ, it's one of the most saddest and tragic warnings we might have. It's a sad and tragic warning. And with the depth of Scripture, I think it goes layer upon layer. With the help of Tim Keller and Moody, I've prepared this talk today. They come up with some great points. But there's a message for us here, particularly here at St. John's, that we've got a choice in life. Each day to walk with Jesus or walk away. That's both if you're inside the church, we have a choice. If you're outside the church, you have a choice to follow Jesus. And that's what we're offered each time. As we gather as the community of grace in this place, we have a choice to follow Jesus or not. You might be wondering why we went into verse 30 if you're reading on the Pew Bibles, because it cuts across different aspects. I think sometimes when we cut up Scripture into what has been cut up into our Bibles, into chapters or different parts, we lose some of the effect, because actually they should be read together. A lot of scholars think that actually this passage should be read in conjunction with what Charlotte preached on last week, which is the sending out. Then this interlude with St. John the Baptist and that part, followed by the feeding of the 5,000. You see, there was a person called Stephen Langton. Anyone knows who Stephen Langton was? Anyone clever in the church? I don't know, because I Googled it, I was preparing it, so I can hardly say that. I thought Stephen Langton was involved in the Magna Carta in the 13th century. Sounds like quite a modern name, doesn't it, Stephen Langton? But apparently he was a cleric in the 13th century. And what did he do? What did he do? He put the chapters in our Bible. So he put the chapters into our Bible, and that's where we find it divided up. And so actually we should read that, and I encourage you to read that this week, is to read it with the sending out, with the John the Baptist and Herod story, and with the feeding the 5,000. Because it tells us to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, no matter what we're going through. And we have a choice in that. What I love about this passage, and I've realised as I was reading it, and this is what I saw, was actually Mark slows down. When he's writing the passage, it's quite quick, isn't it? We're going through the Gospel of Mark. And if you've been tracking with us, it's quite quick on how he goes through the story. However, he goes slowly at this point. There's more detail in this story than most other details in the Gospel of Mark. And so that tells me something to stop and think. The other place he does that is in the Passion of Christ. There's a time to go through this story. And actually, if it's worth more detail for Mark, it's worth more detail for us to press in rather than just skipping through it. It's one of those significant, pivotal moments. If you're wondering what Jesus was doing at the sending out of the 2x2, Jesus doesn't go out, does he? He doesn't go out in that story at all. What's Jesus doing at that point? Well, scholars think, if you look at John 6, there's a moment when Jesus goes to Jerusalem on his own. And actually, he's there, still teaching, still restoring. And actually, this interlude ties in quickly with that story, in that this story of Herod Antipas and John the Baptist steps into that space with Jesus is in Jerusalem. And actually, it comes up in Mark's Gospel because this is significant. Because actually, people start pointing towards Jesus rather than John the Baptist. And then both Gospels have the feeding the 5,000 in that place. And so there's a slowness and a more detail in this story. But there's a tragedy and a sadness. This story is sad. And we are faced with sad stories all the time. Sad stories this week were Liam Payne in Argentina, making wrong choices, getting himself in a mess with dark consequences. Thousands, if not millions, of teenagers, or now in their 20s, mourning those choices. And then this week, I've been alongside Gavin, and he's been at hospital with his wife, Sonia. Some of you all know Sonia today. Sonia's the amazing indigenous South American lady who has the biggest smile in the world. And she's been on our welcome team for the last 4 to 5 years. Sonia's story is one of extraordinary faith of choices. As a 9-year-old, she was paralyzed and couldn't move, yet she met Jesus in a dream and was healed. When she got to the age of an adult, she became a lecturer in English and French in Bolivia. Sonia then had a husband that wasn't particularly nice, to say the least. And following other tragedies in her life, was eventually trafficked to the UK to work to send money back. She could have had a choice all throughout this to walk away from Jesus, but she never did. She pressed in again and again into Jesus. As she was over here doing 18-hour days, doing 4 jobs, living in a room with many people. I looked at my schedule this week and it doesn't bear any relation to what Sonia did every day. But she praised God and she loved God. And then, just as she was about to be deported, she was involved in a terrible car accident. And she was put in a coma and seriously injured. Again, she had a dream of Jesus who told her, and she asked Jesus, "Not now, I'm not ready." If you know Sonia, she'd have told the stories to you in coffee. And she came round and she's walked with the Lord. She came out of that accident with some problems with her brain in relation to aneurysms and different things, and she's under medication, and she has been since that point. Sonia eventually got landed papers because she met a wonderful man named Gavin, who he didn't expect to find love late in life. And for the last 13 years, they've been married. And Gavin's looked after her with all his heart, soul, and mind. And it's a beautiful story. And it continues to be a beautiful story. But this week on Tuesday, precious Sonia had another stroke. And she's in a coma. And it hasn't looked good. But Gavin, who's been on the fringe of our church and said, Sonia's faith has got me through, has continued to have hope. He had a choice to say, that's it. But we've been praying by her bedside for the last week. And he has kept that vigil going in the visiting hours of the ICU at East Surrey Hospital. But what it did as I sat there in the storm of life, Sonia was Jesus to us, even unconscious. She was amazing. She preached to us about the love of Jesus because she was there in the room. In her frailty, because she knew where she's going, whatever happens. And she's sure of her faith. I used to see Sonia being spoken to, or I thought, by Jehovah's Witnesses in town. And I used to worry about them trying to convert Sonia. Till I spoke to Gavin this week. And he said, no. She's the one who's gone up to them. And she's telling them about Jesus and how much Jesus loves them. And I sat down and thought, oh my word, what a woman. And so I sat there this week thinking, how do I live my life? What's the problems of my life compared with Sonia's been through? Yet she presses on with the joy. Gavin kept on saying, I'm not being funny, Steve, but every single worship song in my house is a worship song about Jesus. So every song in my house is a worship song. And Sonia just carries the love of Christ. If anyone has met Sonia, you'll come away differently by her smile and her love. And we thought there was no hope. There still very much doesn't look good. However, on Friday or Thursday, I can't remember, it's all merged into one, Sonia opened her eyes and squeezed Gavin's hand. And that's a miracle in its own right. And every moment is a miracle right now for Sonia and for Gavin. And so we stand here and gather here with our problems, and we've got real problems, all of us. Real fears, real choices, real hardships. But we've got a choice to be like Sonia and press in or not. And I know where the hope and the freedom comes. And so, we've got a choice. We might have critics, we might be in a crisis, we might have consequences, but we have a choice to be made. I think that choice is often the narrow way. Jesus says in Matthew, Rachel, in Matthew, the verse that's there. No, Matthew. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter in it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. I was having a conversation with a member of our church, and they're really on fire for God, and they're really pressing in, but they get a bit frustrated. And what they've realised is that many of us as Christians will have lukewarm lives and would be okay with just carrying on, but we'll be tossed in the wind. But actually, there's a narrow path that maybe only a few take. And I think that's what we read in the story of John the Baptist and Herod. There is a path to be taken, like John the Baptist, or a path like Herod that leads to destruction. That's the choice that we have. There's a picture that I'm going to show here. If we can have the picture, that'd be great. So there's a famous picture of St. John the Baptist. I won't even attempt Caravaggio, won't even attempt in my South London accent, the name of the painter. But that's a beautiful picture. Do you know the circumstances? This is a harrowing and beautiful picture. It is a picture of John the Baptist's beheading. But it shows light and dark. It shows people pressing in, people who are indifferent. People are just practically bringing the platter while someone's doing the deed. Actually, this is a choice that the artist took. Apparently, he committed a murder and ran away to Malta, where you'll find this painting to this day. And this is his confession to God. And actually, his signature is actually written in the blood of John the Baptist. And it's his way of going, oh my goodness, I've made a terrible mistake and I need to come back. It's a choice that he had. It's an act of worship, of creativity in a desperate situation. So we have a choice to press in or press out. The thing is, it's not about our strength in that. It doesn't mean that we've got to be really strong and it's about us building up our strength. It's the object of our strength, Jesus, that is important. Our job is just to turn back like the prodigal son. Our job is just to turn towards Jesus. It's ours to hold on to Jesus in the terrible times. It's our choice to make. And so, what does the passage teach us about this? It says that in the doubts and the fears and the worries, we have a choice and where we take it. This passage tells us that we can go one way or the other. This passage says we can press in or press out. What does it look like for you? For Herod, it's a strange kind of story. Herod was a king, Antipas. He's not Herod the Great that you read about in the nativity stories. He's not Herod the Great that killed all those babies. That was the Herod that rebuilt the temple. This is King Herod. I love the irony of Mark, because actually he wasn't a king. He asked the Roman Empire several times in his life to be called king, and they refused it. The last one to Caligula, the emperor, and he banished him because he was so annoyed with him asking, to Gaul. But he actually isn't a king. He's a tetrarch, which is one of the sons that took over the land after Herod the Great was taken. And then they've moved in. And they've moved into different areas of Jerusalem and of Israel. And they've taken control of there. But Herod is living a life that isn't pleasing to God. He's divorced his wife. Not only has he divorced his wife, he's taken another wife that is of Philip. He's not over to taken another wife. He's taken the wife that is actually his niece. He couldn't do anything more that he could to absolutely annoy the people, Jewish people, that he's meant to be leading. So he's done an act that he knows is going to really annoy them. And so, the reason why he arrests John the Baptist is he arrests John the Baptist because he decides that actually he needs to quieten down John the Baptist, because the only person there is in the whole of Israel that will stand up to Herod is John the Baptist. John the Baptist is the only one to have the courage to stand up and say, this is wrong. And when we face lots of issues today as Christians, is to have the courage to stand up and say, this is wrong. We have a choice to be made, to be silent or say this is wrong. And John the Baptist has that courage to stand up and say, this is wrong, this is not right. Quite often we can cop out with grace a little bit, and not with grace entirely. We have the love of Jesus, but we don't want to bring the truth. And therefore we don't want to make a hard choice or a difficult decision. But John the Baptist is so sure of his own faith, his own identity, he can have that conversation or continue to say what he believes, even when he's arrested. He's arrested and taken into custody, isn't he? Can I have the reading back up of the Mark one, please? That'd be great. And just flick through to verse 20, if that's all right. Herod feared John and protected him, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man. When Herod heard John, he was greatly puzzled, yet he liked to listen to him. What we know about Herod is he brings it in and he's got these doubts, he's got these fears, yet he puts John the Baptist into prison, and yet he continues to listen to him. Wouldn't you say, if someone was really annoying you and saying that actually you'd done everything that was wrong, wouldn't you get slightly annoyed and not want to listen to him? But there's something attractional about John the Baptist, and Herod can't help but listen to him. You see, what Herod's doubts have done is made him unstable, unsure. But what you can see with the doubt is there's an opportunity in those questions and those fears when you meet the truth. We all have a choice to make when we meet the truth. And for Herod in this place, it's John the Baptist who's making straight the path, preparing the way. And he doesn't stop giving his message. He makes Herod think. You know, James, the book of James talks about doubt being double-minded, and we toss in the waves. Here the word used by Mark is slightly different. It's when someone's on a journey. And when they're on a journey, they get paralyzed about making any decision to go on. And so he's in this unbalanced way where Herod has an opportunity. This is the tragedy of the story. There is still hope for Herod at this point because he's listening and liking and being fascinated by John the Baptist. The fascination and puzzlement is, how could this person who's in such weakness, who's under arrest, who I've got power over, continue to say the truth to me? Because he kept on bringing him out. This is after his arrest. There's something addictive for Herod about listening to St. John the Baptist. And when we meet Jesus, there's something addictive when we come towards Jesus that we can't help when we first come into faith about being around people that love Jesus. That's the contagious nature of a community of faith. But that can only be contagious if it's not lukewarm. If you're lukewarm, if you haven't got a heart, the passion for Jesus, people are going to pick up nothing of that. And therefore, we've got a choice to be made. And so, what does doubt do in our life? Doubt makes us sometimes unstable. Doesn't mean that doubt is bad. The book of Jude says that we should have mercy for those who doubt, because our doubt gives us a choice to go deeper and deeper. It's an opportunity that we can be pushed towards, and it helps us look at what's the foundations of our lives. St. Augustine would say our longings and desires. When I've had doubt in my calling, doubt in my walk with Jesus, what it's done is push me more towards Jesus. It's helped me look at what's more important in my life. Is it Jesus or is it money and status? Is it Jesus or is it a number of people come St. John's? Is it Jesus or is it the car we drive? Is it Jesus or the state of my marriage? Is it Jesus or something else? And this is the opportunity that's given to Herod, because it exposes it. And there's a chance and an opportunity, a window that Herod can step towards. But Herodias knows that this window is there. And she steps in knowing Herod and his fears and anxieties and closes it. We read as she realizes that as he listens, that he might change. She steps in and closes that window of opportunity. And she knows that her husband will not want to give up his power and his security. And that's the tragedy of the story. There's an opportunity to review a life, and there's a decision to be made. And we read that Herod makes the wrong decision. How do we know that? Because later in the story, when John the Baptist is dead, Jesus is going to trial. Jesus comes before Herod. He comes before Herod, and this time Herod isn't liking or puzzling what Jesus is saying. He's not even interested. He just mocks Jesus. What does Jesus say? Does he give him that opportunity, open the door? He can see into Herod's heart and has died. He's made his choice. Jesus says nothing. You think Herod is like Judas. Judas has walked with Jesus throughout that whole time. And he comes and makes a choice betray, a choice he regrets with consequences. And that's what we live in today. We often live without the consequences or talking about it in church. But there are consequences of what we do. I see it every day. And in my own life, consequences that either move towards or back. I think he's graceful and he keeps that window and that opportunity open so long. I want to live a life like Sonia. That ordinary, under the radar kind of life with the joy of Christ. Speaking to Jehovah's Witnesses because she's so secure in who she is. Not fearful of what they'll think. I think my job as a pastor in this church is sometimes to love you and care for you, but call you out when you move away. Not to condemn, but to convict. Because that's what Jesus does to me every day. Are you moving towards Jesus or away? So this morning, as we think of Herod the Great, Herod the Great went through that. Antipas. And to think about his choice and the tragedy of his story, and it is tragic. We need to press in again. Make a decision. Be decisive. Because that's what our doubts and questions bring up. It's not the strength of our faith, because to have fear and doubt is okay. It's what we do with it that matters. Do we choose to follow Jesus and grab hold of him rather than grabbing hold of other stuff, like a compliment from someone else or security financially? There'll be lots of things that we can grab in the world, but it's got to be Jesus. Tim Keller uses it, a illustration in his preach about this, about a branch. He says, when you're on the edge of a cliff, like someone in Psalm 73 that's on the edge, and when you fall off that cliff and there's just one branch to grab, is it the faith that you have in that branch that matters? Is it your faith that matters in that branch? And he says, no, it's actually the security of that branch that matters. And actually, Jesus is pretty secure. So in our fear and doubts, it's what happens to that, us in that. Does it push us towards the object of our faith, Jesus Christ? And so this morning, on a wet day, on a hospital bed at East Surrey Hospital, is it the power of mine and Gavin's prayers that matter? Or is it Jesus that matters? Jesus is in control. We don't know what will happen. But what I know is Jesus is in that room. And Sonia is preaching to us without saying a word. Because she points us to Christ. And so you shouldn't do this because you admire different people. As one of the preachers I listened to said this week, said, actually, you've got to get your heroes out of the way. John the Baptist is the first witness for Christ in the Bible. When you think about turning him, his mum's womb, he's the first witness to Jesus Christ because they meet in the womb. And the Greek word for witness is martyr, rhea. And he's the first martyr for Christ. But he doesn't point to himself ever. He always points to Christ. That's what we've got to do as Christians. Our preachers shouldn't be about, oh, well done, Steve, or well done, Charlotte, well done, Joel, well done, whoever preaches. It should be, I met Jesus in that preach. Our worship should be about Jesus. So we quite often, when we become Christians, I do read loads of books about Mother Teresa or Dietrich Bonhoeffer, or you've got the saints in the past. Their purpose is only to point to Jesus. And so the most important thing today is to encounter Jesus. To look at the story of Herod, to see it as a warning, to allow it to examine your heart, and to bring your fears and doubts to the cross of Jesus Christ. On the cross, Jesus felt complete abandonment. On the cross, he lost it all for us. So we can either choose to step towards that narrative or step away. And each of us will bring something here this morning. Not some of it won't be where Gavin is or and Sonia is, and I know there's so many people going through different things in the church right now. But we've got a choice. It's not about our effort, it's about what he's done. But to take the narrow path is to take that path and be transformed. To not have enough of Christ to be informed, to have enough of Christ to be transformed. And that's what ministry time, our worship and meeting Jesus is about. So where's your fear this morning? Is it about how your kids are? Where's your fear this morning? Is it about where the next meal's coming from? Where's your fear this morning? Is it about a sin that you're trapped in? Where's the fear this morning? Is it your unanswered prayer will affect your faith in God? Where is your fear this morning? Could be countless things. We've all got them. But it's where we place them. And I'd suggest this morning we place them at the foot of the cross to be empowered by the resurrection. Because when you do, you have that hope that sets you on fire, and you have joy and peace no matter the circumstances. Shall we stand?